drinking water and sanitation will be joining us shortly. We have Girja Bharat, founder director MU Gamma Consultants, who's one of the people formulating the treated wastewater reuse policy of India. Ramit Sen, assistant director, Institute for Sustainable Communities. He's working with farmers to improve water efficiency in agriculture. There's Anjali Parasnis of TERI, who has some very interesting stories to relate from the ground of her work in Palghar, Maharashtra. S. Vishwanath, urban planner. All of you know him as Zen Rain Man on Twitter. From the wells of Bangalore to lakes and water bodies all across India. He knows everything. I think that is to know about water bodies. And Shubhagato Dasgupta, a very long time friend and in a way a mentor of mine, who's taught me everything I know about sanitation and water. So everything that I know is to his credit, and what I don't know is entirely my fault. Thank you all very much. It's such a privilege to have all of you with me and talking about something that I think came to the forefront really in a very big way during the COVID crisis. And we realized exactly how important, if we hadn't earlier, how important water was for hygiene and sanitation. I'd like to come to you first, Vishwanath. I keep thinking of you as Zen Rain Man, but I'd like to come to you first and ask you what really, how. Oh, okay. Mr. Iyer has joined us. Great. Mr. Iyer, welcome. Can you hear us?
Yeah, hi Kaveri, how are you? Sorry, I'm a little
Great.
late.
No, we thought we'd start and not waste time, but can we have you delivering the keynote address, Mr. Iyer? It's such a privilege to have you with us. I think you know most of the panelists here at some point or the other. You've possibly worked with them or met them. There's Shubhagato Dasgupta of CPR. There's Girja Bharat. There's Vishwanath, who I think we all know as Zen Rain Man. There's Ramit Sen from Institute for Sustainable Communities, and there's Anjali Parasnis of TERI. So, welcome, Mr. Iyer. May I request you to deliver your keynote address
Sure.
directly, which, and then, as I told all the panelists, at some point you have to leave early, but that's all right. So, welcome, and
Thank you
please
very
do
much,
tell
Kaveri.
us the lessons of Swachh Bharat and what we can really learn and take away from every other mission that is to follow.
Sure. Yeah, hi Kaveri and all the panelists. Good to catch up with old friends. And yeah, this keynote address is sounding a little daunting. I thought I'm going to have a kind of a friendly chat, but let me see.
It is friendly, but
No, good to know. But yeah, let me just touch upon sort of what are the key lessons and experiences we got out of the Swachh Bharat mission,
yes,
and then how are we sort of applying them to the new mission, which is the Jal Jeevan mission,
right,
the drinking water mission, and also to Swachh Bharat Phase 2, because
yes,
there is a Phase 2 going on. Now, again, just to quickly touch base with the sort of key elements of the program, all of you would know that this Swachh Bharat mission, kicked off by the Prime Minister, announced by the Prime Minister on August 15, 2014, when my wife and I were sitting in our apartment in Hanoi in Vietnam and
hmm,
listening to this. And, when I think a tipping point when he spoke about the indignity and the insecurity of women and girls in particular who go out to defecate in the open, and how, you know, we could do better than that. And therefore, he went ahead and made that very bold statement that the country would become open defecation free by the 150th birth anniversary of Mahatma Gandhi.
right,
So that was a tipping point. And then over the course of those 5 years, from 14 to 19, you know, uh, I think the Prime Minister's vision, followed by Jan Andolan, our ministry was trying to coordinate all this. And I think if the word would be unleashed. So I think a Jan Andolan was unleashed,
hmm,
where people got involved in this movement, became a revolution in a sense.
hmm,
And the whole behavior change campaign kicked off, where the focus was not really on construction of toilets, but more on getting people to change their behavior from defecating in the open. and start using the toilets which were constructed.
Right.
So that was the effort. So in the process, some big numbers, 550 million people stopped defecating in the open, more than 100 million toilets were constructed. And in order to do this, we had an army of Swachhagrahis. These are grassroots level village motivators who were trained in how do you trigger communities, what are community approaches to sanitation. So that was at the grassroots level. And then, of course, to complement the behavior change communication campaign, we also did mass media. We had campaigns like Darwaza Band with Amitabh Bachchan. We had Toilet Ek Prem Katha, the movie. So there were a number of these programs which were implemented. And the challenge was, of course, to do it at scale. And we always like to remember the four major challenges which we faced at that time. We call them the four S's. Scale, speed. The scale was very daunting. Out of the 1 billion open defecators in the world, 60% were in India. So we had to deal with between 550 million to 600 million people defecating in open. So the scale was very big. Speed was important. We had only 5 years to get it done. And we could no longer follow the sort of drip approach which had been carried out over the last, 67, 70 years since independence, where only incremental change took place on rural sanitation. And then, of course, we had to deal with stigma, the third S, the need for behavior change. And the fourth, and certainly not the least, sustainability. How do you make sure that the change behavior sticks and that people can sustain the outcomes of open defecation free? So coming out of this, the whole experience, I can go on at length, but, I would say that summarizes the challenges. And then we learned that there were four major lessons which came out of this program. Some of them are, quite intuitive to us, but particularly for a global audience, when we did this international convention, they were very, very intrigued in how we managed to sort of achieve what we did. And those four lessons became very important. And those four lessons, easy to remember, the four P's. And the first P was and always will be political leadership. This was the first time a prime minister of the country had sort of stuck his neck out and made a commitment and put out a very big idea, which was, to change the behavior of so many people. The second P, which should never be underestimated, is public financing. It became very important for the finance minister to understand the importance of the program and then commit resources for it. In many parts of the world, we found that while the line ministry or the sector people are convinced about the importance of their own sector, its health impact, etc., the finance ministry is not convinced, and they have to allocate scarce resources. Why would they give money to sanitation and not, for example, to health or to infrastructure? So we made the case. So it was important to make the case, and it was the finance ministry, the finance minister in particular, the late Mr. Jaitley, was a great supporter. When we started succeeding, then he started increasing our budget. So more than $20 billion, or about 1 lakh plus crores, was invested in this program, both from the center and the state. The third P is partnerships. This could never be a Sarkari program. We needed to work with development partners, the media, NGOs, the private sector, sarpanches, the political community. So everyone needed to come on board. It had to be a partnership. And the fourth P, of course, had to be people's participation. The Jan Andolan, getting people to own it, to take pride in it, to be accountable for making their village open defecation free. So I think those were the major lessons we learned from it, the SBM. And then if you come now to how are we applying, so they pretty much apply to the new Jal Jeevan Mission, right? Now, this mission was again in the Prime Minister's first address to the country in his second term. Just as he announced the SBM in his first speech of his first term, we had Prime Minister Modi, 15th August 2019, announcing the Jal Jeevan Mission, which has promised Har Ghar Jal, for tap water in every rural household in India. And again, the scale is pretty staggering. There we had 550 million to deal with. Here we need to go from a coverage of less than 20%. So only 18% of rural households in India, about 4.5 to 5 crores, have tap water in their homes.
Right.
We need to go from 18% to 100% again in 5 years.
Hmm.
So a huge challenge. And so that means about 15 crores, 14 to 15 crore new tap connections need to be provided.
Right.
That's about 150 million tap connections. Very, very challenging, very complex. Water is even more complex than sanitation. We thought behavior change was difficult. It was. But here, it's not about changing behavior because everyone wants water, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
In sanitation, we were selling a product for which there was no intrinsic demand.
Right.
And therefore, we had to overcome that. In water, everyone wants clean water, everyone wants health insurance, everyone wants infrastructure, everyone wants a roof over their head.
Right.
So you don't need to worry about that demand, but you need to worry about water conservation,
Right.
wastage of water. So the behavior change in the Jal Jeevan Mission is a little different, but equally complex.
Right.
So the scale is very big. Again, the same time frame, 5 years. Now, again, partnerships got to be done with grassroots organizations, with NGOs, with technology, and of course, people's participation, because the idea is that the communities, as far as possible, run their schemes themselves.
Hmm.
And a lot of funds have been committed again, the second P, public financing. The Prime Minister announced, I think, 3.6 lakh crores.
Right.
So that's about $60 billion over 5 years. Now, again, so all the lessons are coming in very handy.
Hmm.
Now, this is a three-in-one mission where
Right.
we're looking at source sustainability to make
Right.
sure that we're not just pulling out water and not recharging it.
Right.
Then distribution, hopefully, to be managed locally as far as possible.
Hmm.
And then, very importantly, a reuse of the grey water. Grey water is the water which comes out of the kitchen and out of bathing.
Right.
Is not as toxic as the toilet water which comes out of toilets.
Right.
But again, how can we reuse this either for agriculture after some minimal treatment or even for recharging groundwater?
Right.
So these are some of the lessons. Now, cutting across both the programs,
Hmm.
I think, just to make it easy to remember, the implementation of these programs is very, very important. And
Right.
too often, all of us at the policy level, we get caught up in our ivory tower of policy making.
Right.
We love the policy making, the ideas, the concepts,
Right.
and then typically translating them into reality becomes very challenging and usually gets neglected
Hmm.
all the way down to the last mile. So, in fact, in many ways, we like to say that, to use a term which sounds a bit of a contradiction,
Right.
the policy of implementation. And I
Yeah.
think that became very, very important for us in Swachh Bharat, and that's something which we are trying to roll out in the Jal Jeevan Mission. Let me just take you very quickly through that A, B, C, D, E, F of implementation.
Right.
So, and this is something we learned from this program. A stands for alignment.
Hmm.
Now, when a leader articulates his or her vision,
Hmm.
it does not necessarily follow. Sometimes we take it for granted that the entire organization gets aligned behind the vision. You
Right.
need to work at it.
Right.
So, particularly in a federal system in India, where water and sanitation are state subjects,
Right.
you cannot take for granted, particularly if there are different political parties in the states. It's never easy to assume that they are automatically going to take your project and run with it.
Right.
Therefore, alignment you need to work at in a federal system. And it was our job to align everyone in the government of India and the states and the districts with the Prime Minister's vision. So A stands for alignment, which is the first critical step.
Right.
B stands for belief. When I took over this program, at that time, my original team, they were, to be honest, a little skeptical about how achievable was this vision articulated by the Prime Minister.
Right.
It is very big. It has never happened before. Sanitation is a state subject. So we had to become believers, and everyone had to become a believer.
Right.
And that took a lot of time. It took a lot of disruption. Took a lot of motivation. And people had to believe all the way from government of India to the state, all the way down. And so that's the second B. Now the C is communicate.
Hmm.
And communication is at the heart of the Swachh Bharat mission.
Hmm.
What I've seen in all my sort of experience in different organizations, in most cases, communication is sort of, and I don't know if Vandana is on this or not, and Kaveri, all of you guys are brilliant communicators, right? But typically in programs, communication is sort of hived off into a corner of the program.
Right.
you say you are a communication person, so give me a little bit of communication, but it's not mainstream. For us, communication was at the heart of the Swachh Bharat mission. It was all about communication. And we were lucky we had a communicator in chief. The Prime Minister was a brilliant communicator, but we had to take that all the way down. So communication at all levels, and whether it's at the GOI level, are you communicating to stakeholders in Delhi, at state level, at district level, and finally right down at the grassroots level, where you're communicating, you're doing interpersonal communication with locals using Swachhagrahis. So that became very important. And then the D is democratize. This thing had to be pushed down to the lowest appropriate level, which was the community.
Right.
And unless the community owned the project, they invested in it, and they committed to making their villages open defecation free, it wasn't going to happen and it would never be sustainable.
Right.
So democratize, push it down to that old principle of subsidiarity, which is the lowest appropriate level. In this case, it was the village community.
Right.
And they took charge, that social pressure, they made sure that their neighbors had toilets and all of them had toilets.
Right.
So there was an element of ownership and pride when the village became open defecation free. And the E is evaluate. We can keep throwing out Sarkari figures. We are quite confident our MIS is robust, but obviously your credibility is enhanced if you can get third-party verifications of all the figures, the numbers, the statistics which we throw out. So we carried out a series of third-party exercises and external evaluations on a number of parameters, which went well beyond coverage. So for example, the World Bank did a third-party survey repeatedly, and they found that the coverage was very close to the official figure. Usage was always above 90. So that added, and there was an expert working group with independent people, with some of our quote-unquote critics. So that added to the credibility of the program. We got agencies like UNICEF to do a number of studies for us. The economic impact, the health impact, the environmental impact, all that was established by these external agencies. The World Health Organization, they did a study which found that more than 300,000 lives were saved, typically of children below the age of 5, because we avoided the diarrheal deaths because people started using toilets. And the F is follow through. We need to sustain the gains. You can't stop off. It's never mission accomplished. You've got to keep working at it. There are still gaps in ODF. And today we have, under Swachh Bharat Mission Phase 2, the first pillar is always sustaining ODF, continuing the communication, continuing the capacity building, making sure that gaps are plugged. And then, of course, we moved on to a broader definition of Swachhata, which is visual cleanliness, solid and liquid waste management, plastic waste management, etc. So that's the ABCDEF. All these lessons we're applying in the Jal Jeevan mission. And I think important to recognize that water conservation is now, they're trying to mainstream this. So even institutionally, in the Modi 2.0 government, for the first time, water got integrated institutionally.
Right.
So water resources, the Department of Water Resources and Ganga Rejuvenation was integrated with my own ministry, the Ministry of Drinking Water and Sanitation. And we became the Ministry of Jal Shakti. So very important that water resources at one end and service delivery at the other end came together. And because we are facing, critical shortages in water across the country, both urban and rural. And we can't keep supplying water assuming that there will always be a source. Groundwater is being mined. Today India consumes or mines more groundwater than China and America combined. There's huge extraction of groundwater. There are no incentives to conserve. So that campaign to conserve is equally important. And therefore, we need to look water at a holistic level, not just at supplying water or just looking at big dams. We need to look at smaller scale storage. We need to, again, involve people in a Jan Andolan for water conservation. And the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which we ran last year, was a people's movement on water conservation. So again, those lessons of the Swachh Bharat mission coming into the Jal Shakti Abhiyan. And of course, we need to change the practices of farmers. Almost 90% of all water consumed in India goes into the agricultural sector. And as all of you are aware, we have a lot of excessive wastage of water. we grow crops like rice and wheat and sugarcane, which consume 2 to 3 times the water which other countries use for the same crops. So how do we improve, bring about improved practices of water management, drip irrigation, sprinkler systems for the farming community? Again, very, very important. So water needs to be looked at in an integrated manner, and the Jal Jeevan mission is trying to bring all those elements together in a programmatic way. And I think we are going to be well on track. It's going to be quite challenging over the next 4 years to deliver the Jal Jeevan mission. So let me stop here, Kaveri. I think I've said all I wanted to say. In terms of the Swachh Bharat mission, what we learned, how are we applying those lessons and mainstreaming them in the Jal Jeevan mission? But if there are any comments or questions, I don't know what your format is. I'm happy to take them. I'm here for another 10 minutes as well.
Okay, great. Wonderful. I'd like to ask the panelists whether they have any questions to Mr. Iyer, since he's so kindly asked for them. Any one of you, would you like to put a question to him?
May I? My name is
Yes,
Bhakti.
sure.
Hi, my name is Bhakti Devi. I am based in Bangalore and running a water conservation program for the urban water users. And I was just wanting to know, how do I get in touch with the tools that we have developed to promote water conservation amongst water users, households and families?
Sure. What I can do is I can send the contact to Kaveri.
Yeah.
Sure. This is being, so this year the Jal Shakti Abhiyan, because it fits in more with the mandate of the Department of Water Resources.
Right.
You need to contact a lady called Devashri Mukherjee.
Right.
Devashri, who used to be in the PMO, she's now Assistant Secretary in the Department of Water Resources. She's managing this year's Jal Shakti Abhiyan, which is taking off now. And she'll be very happy to use all your experience, your tools, your techniques, because they're focusing on water conservation at the local level. So I'll send it to you, Kaveri.
Thank you.
Vishwanath, is there a question that you'd like to put to Mr. Iyer?
No, I mean, it's been a fantastic journey to observe from both outside, but also to look at what's happening on the field itself.
Yeah.
My question to Mr. Iyer would be this. What one has seen is that if the Gram Panchayat and the Village Water and Sanitation Committee is strong, then the delivery mechanism simply amplifies itself. Is decentralization of governance also being pushed sort of parallelly as a track to make sure that the ownership at the grassroots level is increased, is enhanced?
No, absolutely. Look, I think it's an excellent point by Mr. Vishwanathan. The Village Water and Sanitation Committee, in fact, is at the core or at the heart of the Jal Jeevan mission. Learning from the experience which all of us had. I started the Swajal program in UP 25 years ago. It's all about giving a community-based water and sanitation program. There are programs in Gujarat under the VASMO program. So in the Jal Jeevan mission, to put it in a nutshell, we see the Village Water and Sanitation Committee taking all the decisions, including on procurement and on investment. So they are going to play a key role. Again, if wherever you have to have a multi-village scheme, a larger scheme, because groundwater is not available locally, and you've got to transport water from a distance, there you may have a little different management model. You may bring the panchayats together, even districts together, but the in-village distribution system will always be managed by the Village Water and Sanitation Committee. And we are insisting that at least 50% of them are women. All the lessons we have learned, and I'm sure you know much more than me about this, where the key stakeholders are women, they're probably better managers. We saw that in the Swachh Bharat mission. And so the VWSCs, just to reiterate, assisted by, in the old days, we call them support organizations. Here we're calling them implementation support agencies, another acronym, is to support these agencies in planning, implementing, and maintaining their water assets. So very good question, and we are very confident that they will be at the heart of the program.
Right. Shubhagato, is there a question you'd like to ask Mr. Iyer?
Sure, wouldn't miss an opportunity like this. Thanks, Param. That was a wonderful, storyline of how program management has kind of, what lessons in program management can be built across various sectors. The question I have is that while you are engaged in this massive scaled exercise, how does one incorporate learnings within the process? What was your experience about learning from the ground and adjusting the program? Can you give us some instances and throw some light on that?
Sure. I think, Shubhagata knows all of us have been in organizations. We talk of structured learning and building learning into the process. I think it's very important. And, we sort of did that a little intuitively, a little seamlessly in the Swachh Bharat. A couple of examples. So, for example, early in the game, we realized that the kind of linchpin of this program, of any program in India, actually, the district collector, deputy commissioner, the district magistrate. So when we were trying to unleash, what we call the PM, CM, DM formula, the collector is so inundated with a multiplicity of government programs.
Right.
So he or she really doesn't have the time to focus on any single program. And all of us are trying to grab a piece of the collector's time, right, on our programs. And how do we make the case to a collector? So we realized early, so I was with a young collector in Madhya Pradesh, and we were traveling, I forget to which district. And he said, sir, I love this program, behavior, it's exciting. I really don't have the time. I don't have anyone who can focus on it full time while I give overall directions.
Right.
So that made us think about this problem. And the solution was we came up with something called the Zilla Swachh Bharat Prerak program. So we brought in young professionals. So we had the Tata Trust. They were very generous. They recruited 550 young professionals for us. So we gave one to every district. And that young professional, very well qualified. We had people from IITs and IIMs. They just wanted to come out and spend a year in the field. So they acted as the eyes and ears of the collector. So they caught hold of the collector. They were doing it full time. And all they needed was, 20 minutes of the collector's time. So that made a very big difference in the program. We also learned, another example of what we learned along the way was that, the role of the Swachhagrahis. In fact, I'd met Mr. Pratap Bhanu Mehta once to ask for his advice. And he said, listen, you really need to have a strong grassroots army, and that will convince people that behavior change is real. It's not just something you do in the air. So Swachhagrahis came, we trained them, we had one in every village. So as we went along, we learned many things. We learned internationally the importance of disgust in changing behavior. So if you take a hair, dip it in excreta, put it in a glass of water, people say yuck.
Yeah.
They understand that that's what's happening to them if they are getting open. So a lot of lessons we learn along the way. Those are just some examples. And it was a continuous process of kind of course correction which we still got.
Right. Great. Girija, would you like to ask a quick question?
Thanks, Kaveri, for giving me this opportunity. Well, I was remembering 15th August 2014 when the Prime Minister had announced a Swachh Bharat mission. I was in Georgia and my colleagues there, I was on a USAID mission and my colleagues came running and asking, is it too ambitious for this huge figure of open defecation in India? And then in 5 years, I said one sentence, if you aim at the sky, at least you can hit the treetop.
Right.
And fast forward 2019 to August, I had the fortune of meeting Mr. Param Iyer in Stockholm when he delivered the plenary. I think it was a concluding day, and he presented the figure and the transformation India has made in all these 5 years. And he received a standing ovation, if I am not wrong, sir. So I was just comparing these two scenes when I was outside the country and how outside the country they perceive India. And it's like a huge achievement. I have been following Swachh Bharat mission very closely, even before Swachh Bharat mission came into force. So I have known all the milestones and really hats off to have achieved this.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
Ramit has a quick question for you, Mr. Iyer, and then I'll just request Anjali to put in a quick question before we let you go. Ramit?
Yes, thank you, sir. Sir, 2020 has been a year of, uncertainties, with the pandemic hitting. And we all know that we talk of different kinds of corona warrior. Water is a corona warrior. We need water to kind of be safer.
Yeah.
So, what have been some of the, thought processes and alignment on the ministry and the department level in light of this changing scenario where the availability and use of water becomes fundamental to maintaining the safety and security of our citizens?
Yeah.
No, thank you for that question. And I think two very important points are made. No question that clean water is going to be, a very strong corona warrior. In fact, sort of leveraging a little bit of the corona virus situation. So we have been saying that this is all the more reason why you need to have a tap in your house, a functioning household tap connection, which is what we call it. But then you don't need to go out to a stand post where people congregate and where potentially you can get infected.
Yeah, that's right.
So being at home and being safe at home and having your own tap connection is actually a powerful motivator to accelerate the implementation of the Jal Jeevan Mission. And along with that, hygiene promotion, washing your hands with soap. You need water for that, right? And if you've got water at home, it becomes that much easier to practice this very, very critical activity of hand washing with soap. So I think the whole wash and the hygiene aspect, the clean water aspect, and of course the using your toilet at home so you don't go out in the open to defecate again, all of them came together. So wash has become very, very important in the COVID-19 era. And building on that, we have intensified and ramped up our sort of communication efforts in this direction.
Great. Anjali, a quick last question, then I think Mr. Iyer really has to go. I've kept him for far too long. Anjali? Yeah.
Thank you, Kaveri. Mr. Iyer, thanks for your very insightful address. And I really like the ABCD what you have described. We will try to implement it. I'm very glad to tell you in a small village in Maharashtra, we have been implementing some of the important points that you mentioned about behavioral change and source sustainability. I have a question in that context only. At the ground level, we have a lot of challenges in managing the source sustainability and maintaining the circularity. And it requires a lot of infrastructure, a lot of training for the people. We need motivated people also on ground. So how have you managed it in your programs? That is my question. I'm very curious to know that. And in future, we would like to share some of the work that we have been doing, Mr. Iyer, to you. Thank you. And maybe if you give me 1 minute, maybe I'll show you one slide related to WASH, what we're doing, just one photograph, if Kaveri ma'am allows me to do so.
Yeah, quickly.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Can you see this? So this is actually in a very remote village. We have been harvesting the rainwater because the women children over there in the school didn't have the toilets and also a facility to wash hands. So what you can see actually here is the rainwater is being harvested and the girl children are washing their hands. This is 3 years back. So before Corona came and we all started practicing or rather preaching more about hand washing, we have been doing this, and this particular very small school is known now in the entire district as a cleanest school, and this is a role model. So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share this one picture.
Great. Mr. Iyer, would you like to answer that question? Then you're free to go.
Sure. No, thanks, Anjali. That's a great example, by the way. That's a very powerful example of how you're doing rainwater harvesting. You're bringing the school kids on board. So I think to answer your question, communication and capacity building. These are, I think, key for for everything, but in particular for source sustainability. You need to understand it's simple, it's easy, it's low cost, and it can be done. So for that, you need simple tools like preferably using technology. So we've got a thing called the Mobile Academy where we train people through voice recorded messages on sanitation, but it can be done for source sustainability, which is the most neglected part of drinking water, because you assume that the source will always supply water. It will be a perishable source, which is never the case. So whether it's simple rainwater harvesting or recharge, artificial recharge, or simple methods like soak pits, all this is becoming increasingly important. So we converge with other programs like Manrega, but what we try to do is we train the Panchayat Secretary, the Sarpanch, and 1 or 2 local women. We always like to train the women who can become hand pump mechanics or source sustainability warriors, so to speak. So I think it comes down to local capacity building, communication, and training.
Thank you so much, Mr. Iyer. All the very best to you. And thank you for taking all our questions. It really was so informative.
Thank you so much, Kaveri. Thank you to all the panelists, and let's keep in touch, Kaveri.
Yes, thank you. So, Shubhabrata, may I come to you now and ask you really, because the focus has been on rural households and we're looking at targets, but what about urban households? There's equally a crisis of drinking water there.
Thanks, Kaveri. Yes, means urban areas have problems of their own.
Yeah.
Because of the general nature of the politics in the country, urban areas do manage to get resources to take in a lot of bulk water more generally. But it's a struggle to raise the finances to be able to do that. But larger engineering projects for bringing in water from longer distances is a phenomenon that's very much rooted now in urban India. In urban India, concerns on water are related to the health, the environment, and all of it. But prima facie, the most critical issue is around water equity, in my sense, in my understanding, that they are in mainly larger cities. The water equity is a big challenge. There are large pockets that don't have water, while another large segment of population that gets a lot of water, more than what they need. So there is a big the reform for urban areas, for larger urban areas, is surely about, in my view, creating hard water budgets on urban areas, so that within that water budget that they have, in terms of the amount of water, they manage to provide more equitable services. And for that, there are number of possibilities, including 24/7 approaches, which are which have been experimented with for a while, but are yet to take full root in the country.
Have you had any urban body which has shown exemplary use of this water budget?
No, not really. So hard budgets on water are not applicable. They don't work like that in India, except when there is water scarcity.
Right.
It means a good example of a hard water constraint is, of course, Singapore, where I am.
Yeah.
Is because they just don't have any surface water beyond a certain point. And for that, the amount of water storage, means they have water agreements with Malaysia going up to 2060, and all of the city services are kind of made subservient to the availability of water. It kind of is a very water-centric approach to development planning in this city.
Great.
Just as an example.
Right. Ramit, water equity brings me to you, obviously, because groundwater in agriculture is possibly, it's wasted the most. I mean, you have most inefficient use of water in agriculture. What are the things that you have learned on the ground? Have you had any examples of successes where people have actually been careful? Farmers have been made aware of this.
Right. Thank you, Kaveri. I'll borrow of 3 words which Mr. Iyer said. He said everybody wants water.
Yeah.
And forward to saying that, but where does that water come from?
Right.
Agriculture is like the, elephant in the room. He spoke of, 90% of fresh water use. But I think the water will come from, of course, source strengthening, which he, mentioned, and Vishwanath has done such immense work. The other part is the demand management.
Right.
Efficiency of water use in agriculture in our country, and this is, a broad countrywide average, is 38%. So, which tells us that there is this huge opportunity to free water from, the way it is being used for growing our crops. With our experience at Institute for Sustainable Communities, we are working with farmers across different regions. And I'll, bring the example of working with cotton farmers in Vidarbha, which is also, an area which is impacted by climate, has drought. Is that, there are 3 aspects that, we are engaging and, engaging with farmers on. One is, of course, how do you reduce the environmental footprint of agriculture, water. The other part is the fertilizer bit, because India has one of the highest fertilizer consumption, and nitrate contamination is one of the pronounced contamination after arsenic and fluoride.
Right.
Reducing the environmental footprint. Second is this whole apathy as a user of water, that confining my understanding to water in my tube well, water in my well, but making them understand the larger catchment. And third is the parallel with women, where I would like to share a success story that in cotton where we are working, we see that a woman spends 6 to 7 hours in farming, plus she's responsible for all the water management in the household, but
Right.
very limited decision making ability on what farming decisions she can take. So if you work with women who spend such amount of time on farming and agriculture, empower them with knowledge, give them some kind of knowledge plus economic instruments, so that they are able to bring a change decision making in farming, has helped us to kind of at least, I'm not saying that we have moved the needle completely, but women as as a strong ambassador and agent of change has been our experience to bring in sustainable agricultural practices, which similar to sanitation water involves a lot of behavior change.
So have they changed the cropping pattern, or have they convinced their husbands to do so?
So the cropping pattern, it is also guided by the prevailing prices,
Right.
demand. But what we are looking at is package of practices. Package of practices, so one, of course, everybody talks of drip irrigation. But say but then we have seen that despite being high subsidies, that don't work. But if I were to take the example of package of practices for water, it's about soil moisture conservation. Using say an intercrop of pulses with cotton, which provides additional nitrogen, so you don't have to apply external nitrogen, but also exposes lesser area in your field. Alternate furrow, so instead of applying water in all the furrows, you do alternate furrow. So advocating and promoting these small package of practices are some of the initiatives that we have been engaging, because a long-term change is of course certainly that we would want to, but we have to be guided by the fact that we would want to do something which does not change the balance, and makes agriculture still remunerative for the farmer, at the same time lowering the footprint.
Yeah, I understand that. Anjali, I'd like to bring you in, because when they talk about practices, you have this wonderful example, and I'd like you to share it with all of us.
Yeah, sure. I'll be very happy to. So like one slide I have already shown, but let me take you to our village, which is almost 70 kilometers away from Mumbai, but it doesn't have electricity. And water scarcity is there. There is malnutrition. People do not have sufficient food to eat. That was the scenario when we started working over there. And initially, we just did a very simple plain water audit and asked the women like, what are the major issues? And it all got centered around water. So they said that we have to fetch water around 80 liters from say 1 or 2 kilometers, and so they usually fetch it in pots on their head, so which is like a scenario across India. So initially, we had focused discussion with everybody and said that, see, look, if these women have to fetch so much of water, they spend energy, they spend time, etc., and they are not able to focus on other things like livelihood or nutrition security. So we requested the men, like, would you fetch water for 2 or 3 days in a week? And the answer was, no, this is, this is women's work and we will not do it. So there was completely reluctance to do that. And we said, okay, fine, if that is not working, let's go ahead and do something. So we followed very simple procedures. We said that initially, let's give some, some relief to these women. And let me take you to my screen and the first photo. So do you see this? This is a very interesting photo, which, the school teacher sent me one day. And can you see the...
See it. No, we can't see it.
You can't see? Okay, just give me a second. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we did was to give relief to the women. We thought that let's buy these water wheels, and so these water wheels can carry 45 liters of water. So it's like instead of fetching water thrice from the well, they can just get it in one go. So the day we gave these water wheels, the next day morning, the school teacher at 8 o'clock, he called me, he sent me this picture, and he told me, see the change. Now the women are not fetching water anymore. All the men are very happy to go with these water wheels and they are fetching the water. So Mr. Iyer talked about the behavioral change, and sometimes we have these focused discussions and lot of things, and we expect that some change would take place. But just say these simple water wheels, like some simple technology can really transform the village. And so now women got more free time to focus on other things. And let me take you to another picture. Again, this speaks a lot. This is a transition. If it is a simple technology, the man is carrying it, he is carrying the water wheel. And the traditional way the women is still doing, you know, she is following that, and that way the men are not ready to fetch the water.
This really brings out the gender gap in India.
Yeah, exactly. So what I mean to say is, if the village is provided with sufficient water, it impacts the gender, it impacts health issues, the food nutrition security, also the energy access. And usually, if you see any village, there will be all women surrounding it. Look at the village there are all men fetching the water.
Yeah.
So this was one aspect, you know, where how we could have a positive impact on the gender. I have already talked about the health and sanitation. So there was another thing which was like very difficult, was the nutrition security. And the second thing what we did was we gave them the grey water treatment units, very simple units, which could be dismantled and assembled again by the villagers. So we trained them, we built up the capacity, and by using these grey waters, every household started growing vegetables on a small scale and now on a big scale. So now they have nutrition security. So by giving two things, one is that something to fetch water, and then we did the water audit, and out of the 80 liters only, these houses manage all their activity just in 80 liters of water. And out of that 30 liters, now the grey water that comes out, that we are treating and using for vegetable cultivation. So there is nutrition security that we have addressed. Almost every household has this. They are growing spinach. So the next level was that we have also given them livelihood opportunities by fortifying the spinach powder and mushroom powder into khakras and puris, so that is being consumed. And now I'm very proud to say that in our village there is no malnourished child or malnourished women, which is like a very big achievement. Another very important thing is that now to integrate more sources of protein, we have taught them how to grow azula using the harvested rainwater. And as you can see here, this is a aquaculture unit that we have set up this year in the village, and this is the harvested rainwater now. So they will start growing fish also in these small units.
Wonderful. So thank you, Anjali. I think that's really a remarkable example of a turnaround with such simple innovation. Vishwanath, may I bring you in when we talk about innovation and Jan Andolan? Nobody knows that better than you with your, the movement of Million Wells in Bangalore. Could you talk about your experience there, please?
Yeah, so just to quickly answer about any city with which you asked Shubhagat also, and it ties up to my Million Wells program. This is the town called Belgaum, which has a population of 10 lakhs. Right. And a wonderful engineer called R.S. Nayak revived about 70 to 80 open wells with the help of the community, integrated it with the water network of the city, and now the wells provide about 3 lakh people with water. Wow. Belgaum is a city with 24/7 water supply. They're also doing metering and pricing, and there's no better water conservation device than pricing, and that's been achieved in Belgaum through a combination of 24/7 and open well revival, right? And with community participation. So these kind of innovative things are happening on the ground. Yeah. And the formal system has to learn to absorb this innovation quickly and see where it can be put in place, right? So with the Million Wells in Bangalore, the thing is that the Niti Aayog report and then the BBC report said that Bangalore would run out of groundwater by 2020. That's this year, right? And we were looking at the livelihood opportunities, and we saw that this traditional well digging community are all prevalent in Bangalore. More than 750 families, as such, as we know, were into still deepening old wells, desilting old wells, cleaning up old wells, and digging new wells. With the help of the rainwater harvesting policy, which mandates recharge wells, wells that you dig to put rooftop rainwater and storm water after filtration into the aquifer, these well diggers got a livelihood. And we believe that with the million recharge wells, the city will get water security through livelihoods approach. Now, this is as opposed to a formal infrastructure approach of solving a city's water problem. This is a livelihoods-based approach that we are trying it in Bangalore. And so there are examples like this with wastewater also. where farmers are using untreated wastewater, but if you push and dialogue with them to grow non-edible crops, like for example, mulberry, or in the town of Tumkur, a medicinal plant called Baje, which a young researcher called Rakshita has been working on, then you can actually transform untreated and treated wastewater to a productive livelihood for farmers, and it can enter into the income chain for them, right? So we find a solution for wastewater through farmers' efforts. So I think this kind of million initiatives all across India would be very helpful in solving the water problem.
Right. Where does one find a way to amalgamate all this at some level and to know what to scale and what will not scale? How does one decide that?
I think scale is, in my opinion, a dirty word. It's actually replicability is what we need to find, and replicability is about principles, right? It's not about a product or a finished idea. And if you try to find solutions which are coming from the grassroots, more often than not, with a little bit of knowledge leveraging and in partnership with the solution provider, you can actually transform the landscape, right? So this is what we need to seek all across India, because everything is contextual and very specific to that particular area.
Right. Dr. Bharat, Girija Bharat, I'd like to bring you in here because there's been a lot of talk of wastewater, and you're helping draft the treated wastewater reuse policy of India. Talk about how, what are the things that you're learning?
Very good question. Thanks, Kaveri, for asking this. In fact, we are drafting a treated wastewater reuse policy for India. As you all may recall, on 14th of December 2019, the Prime Minister of India during the National Ganga Council meeting had highlighted the need to reuse and recycle solid and liquid waste and develop a suitable revenue model and state policies, thereby promoting long-term sustainability. Thereafter, the discussions on national policy on treated wastewater reuse started with Ministry of Jal Shakti, and it is being coordinated by National Mission for Clean Ganga, NMCG. It is being supported by GIZ under India-EU Water Partnership and Support to Ganga Rejuvenation Project. And our team comprises of 3 consultants, international consultants, Mr. Jeremy Bird, Mr. Krishna Rao, and myself. And even in spite of COVID, we are consultation process, because we have to have all the stakeholders on board and get to know different opinions, the pros and cons, because treated wastewater has lots of emerging contaminants. We have to be very sure that it can be reused for purposes other than potable, and because many of the countries are actually using potable for potable use, like Singapore has been using new water, recycled water, which is called new water for them. But then for India, with so many complex cities around, we have to be extremely sure that 2 or 3 things are extremely important and very sensitive. One is potable use, the second is aquifer recharge, and the third is using for agriculture for potable, for edible food crops, actually, as Mr. Vishwanath was. Crops, yes. So this is the how it emerged. But thereafter, we have been in the consultation process. We'll be soon coming with the policy. I think by October, we should be ready with the final policy. The overarching goal of this policy is, number 1, to reduce pressure on scarce freshwater resource, because if we can free up some fresh water, that's a huge gain in the water sector. Second is to reduce risk to public health and pollution of the environment. And the third is to achieve economic benefits by adopting a sustainable circular model, economy model. These are the overarching goals, and we are also having few things in mind where we are having that. First, it has to be it has to set out commitments and actions at the central level to underpin, support, and facilitate implementation of treated wastewater reuse policy across the country. Secondly, it should be able to provide a model framework for states, because water is a state subject. We have to have states on board and have to see how it can be implemented in the state level. As Mr. Iyer was saying, policy of implementation is extremely important. So we are seeing how we can integrate it with the and adapt it to different states. We'll be having one part of the policy where we will be having the state model. We'll be specifying the models for the states.
Great.
So this is the overarching goal and aspects which we are basically considering.
Thank you so much.
Developing.
Thank you so much,
Thanks.
Dr. Bharat. We have time for one last question, which I'd like to put to all of you. And I'd like to begin with Shubhagato. What is the one thing that you'd like to change, or what is the one example that you'd like to, I can't use the word scale now, but maybe replicate, one last thought to leave us with.
So I'll just take that, and thank you so much for this last minute. I don't think scale is a bad word, and I'm sure Vishwanath will agree with me. It's about getting scale right.
Right.
Scale doesn't mean massive all the time.
Yeah.
It might mean that you have to decentralize further, right? So you have to make decisions at the right level, and you have to cooperate at the right level. So I think getting scale right in an informed community, means in an informed society, is what the ultimate goal of all the conservation efforts or the behavioral issues around water are. And that creates the demand for seeing like the state, and the state will then respond that way too. So getting the communities in at the right level with the amount of knowledge that is required to push for greener, cleaner environments is, I guess, where we need to go.
Great. Ramit?
Yes, and I'll, again, twist our favorite poem, like water, water everywhere, only if we care and share. So I think it's imperative on every user to, take it upon himself or herself to do their bit to, save whatever amount of water that we have. I'll end with that thought. Thank you.
Anjali?
I will just say that when we take water from the nature and what is seen in our glass of water, we should leave and release the water in that state only back to the nature.
Yeah.
100% water should get treated, and like Romit said, that only if we share and if we care, then only it will be available for us everywhere. Thank you.
Girija? Girija, one last thought.
I would bring the attention of all the panelists here that, yes, I wanted to share the thought that SDG 6 is actually at the heart of all the SDGs. It's unfair of me to say that water is the nodal SDG, but then definitely it has a huge enabling effect on all the other SDGs. So if SDG 6 is being taken care of, all the other SDGs are automatically enabled.
Yeah. And Vishwanath, the last word for you.
Yeah, right. So empower communities, build institutions, focus on groundwater, and treat wastewater as an agricultural and ecological resource.
Right. I think that's really, yes, sorry. I think that's really well said. Thank you so much, all of you, for being with us. And I think we learned a lot today. It'll be, I'd like to put some of these points together and share them with all of you so that we all remember some of the points that were made today. Thank you so much, all of you. And hope to see you again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Ruchin, over to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, like, as how India is moving towards, we all witnessed as how India is moving towards its target of providing safe and pipe drinking water to all rural households. We have heard our panelists and practitioners, and it was great to hear how the work is happening at the ground. And we really appreciate your efforts towards achieving this goal, and like to thank Kaveri ma'am for putting up such a great panel and bringing some amazing real facts for all of us. And on behalf of Tiffin Talks, we will like to thank for joining in today and giving your time. Stay tuned. We'll be back with more of such sessions from various fields very much needed. Thank you. Stay tuned.
Thank you. Bye.